Welcome, everybody, to the Extreme Interview. This is the final edition of the Extreme Interview we're doing for October of 2020 before we get into the stretch of the postseason and the national championship and everything else good with playoff football going into November. And to help me give some insight into postseason football and to show eight-man football at the national stage and give some great insights is none other than the Executive Director of the NHSA, Mr. Hank St. Dennis. Hank, I appreciate you taking the time to hop on for an interview. How was your weekend and watching all the games around the region?
It was good, Spencer. I appreciate you reaching out to me, and love to talk about football, obviously, and this time of year, especially with the playoffs and the tournament coming up.
Yeah, there's a lot of the tournaments coming up, and we've been covering it the last few years, and we're excited to see what happens this year. So, for those who don't know, the NHSA has been around for quite a while, a little bit over a decade. But for those who are listening in and want to know more, how did the NHSA get started? How did you come about to organizing it? And how did you start? Were you the one who started it? Just tell us about some of the history of the NHSA.
Okay. Well, back in the early 2000s, I actually was a coach for eight-man football, and started a program, and we played eight-man. We had, some success and enjoyed playing. I knew basically from a standpoint of eight-man that it did not get a lot of exposure back then. And when I first organized the tournament, I was looking for a location that would be someplace where people would really want to go. And, Panama City Beach was a place that, vacationed a lot down there, had, knew that it was a good location in terms of from the southeast perspective. And then providentially, the good Lord kind of directed me to a facility down there called Laguna Beach Christian Retreat, which is used during the summertime to house camps for churches, church groups, college fellowship groups, just any variety of teens and young adults for either some type of weekend or whatever, to get away, go to the beach, and have your fellowship and your organization meetings down there. So they're very equipped, had a great facility, and in my mind, it was the perfect venue to house teams from different parts of the country, to be able to be like on a campus and enjoy the beach and the facilities. And then in addition to that, the warm weather at that time of year. And then, of course, to play football in a championship atmosphere. And so did that, went out and, reached out to different coaches and leagues to see if we could get something going, and ended up, putting it together and have every year since. And pretty much it's changed a little bit only in that, teams have gotten, leagues have formed. And so, each state seems to have a different format in terms of playoffs and when they start and when they're finished. And so it used to be when I was growing up that football was played through Thanksgiving and that basketball was not allowed to start until after Thanksgiving. And over the years, that's changed to where now, you've got basketball starting up and having, preseason tournaments as early as late October and early November. And for a lot of these 8-man teams, the players on the on the football team are also the players on the basketball team. And so depending upon where you go to school, your athletic director might be the basketball coach. And so he's anxious to get his players in there. So, the priority might not be to finish out the season and go to a national championship as much as, hey, let's get basketball going because we can play in March for a championship with the basketball team. And so again, through the years that's changed. It used to be that we used to have a lot of teams from Georgia come down there. We've had teams from North Carolina come down there, South Carolina. Tennessee has always been well represented. We've had teams as far away as Missouri, even Florida. We've had a Florida team come and play, Louisiana. So again, we've been able to put it on each year, but we have a certain amount of uncertainty because obviously we want to get the best teams we can to come and play in that tournament. But a lot of times you don't really know until later on in the season. And so there's just a little bit of uncertainty in terms of which teams are going to show up, which teams are going to play. And the good Lord has been faithful, at least in bringing some of the top teams each year to play in that tournament.
And bringing in the top teams, you mentioned it yourself, it's a difficulty with now basketball being a partial priority for certain schools. But at least the last few years, you guys have definitely had some good national championships in NHSA history with top teams. Of course, last year, overtime 92-90 between Evangel and Ezel Harding, and 2018 you had that close matchup between Christian Community and Evangel, and of course 2017 between Russell and Christian Community. So it's more than just an opportunity for student athletes and their teams to bond and to go down to Florida to have a relaxing vacation, but at the same time, it produces quality competition to display the best of the best in 8-man football, and it provides that outlet for them. And at the end of the day, a player gets to call themselves a national champion. So it's a really good thing you're doing, but at the same time, it also gives it's really good that it gives the kids the opportunity to get another game on their season.
Absolutely. And that you hit the nail on the head when you said it really does a lot for a program because kids that are in high school, number one, they're getting an opportunity to go away on a trip, and then they're also getting an opportunity to play for a national championship. And so between those two things, it really does a lot for the school and the program and for the community, because it really does draw people into knowing more about, that school and their team and being able to go to a tournament like this. And we've gotten through the years, we've had coaches that basically have said over and over again that, it's helped their program in terms of numbers. It's helped them in terms of getting kids to come out for the football that may not have considered playing in the past. And so it's a recruiting tool as well as a reward for a good season, right? And And everybody knows going away for, 3 or 4 days and being able to be together with your friends and, playing football and ending the season, that you've had a good season. What a great way to remember your season, that you'll always remember it through the years as one of the highlights of your career, being able to play in that tournament down in Panama City.
By far. And speaking of numbers, I'm looking at the recent ranking system for the NHSA for 8-man. And, you've got teams that, of course, are ranking high up on the list, and they've been there before. They've been consistently at the top rankings because of how skilled the programs they are. You got Evangel, Ezekiel, of course, the Tennessee Heat popping up recently this year, which they've usually been below the 10 ranking spot, and they've now had a break off year. But what goes into the ranking system for the NHSA for 8-man team? Just what goes into that on the factors of how a team gets number one over number two?
Well, obviously when you're talking about teams from different states and playing in different conferences and, those type of things, there's a number of factors that go into considering, who's up there. And the great thing about 8-Man Extreme is that you guys broadcast a number of games. So it's not like, hey, we're going in there blind, not having seen a lot of these teams. The great thing that you guys do is you give exposure to these 8-man teams, and then you also help in terms of, from a comparison standpoint, to see, different teams and how they, how they're built, and who their key people are, and where they are during the season. When you start out in August, right, you've got a clean slate. You've got new players that are on the team, people who have transferred into your school, or kids that that may have been younger that are now stepping up into varsity. And then you've had players that were with the team that are gone now. You've got new coaches. So in August, you really don't know what to expect. So you're sort of going in blind. And so you try and get as much information from coaches and from, Max Prep and from a scheduling standpoint. And then some history. I mean, that's one of those things where when you've been doing this long enough, and this, Spence, when you've been doing it long enough, you sort of know ahead of time who some of those players are that are coming back, some of those teams that, how they fared last year and the year before, and what, sort of what the expectation is for this year. So that helps. And then as the season goes along, we pay a particular attention to the week by week, games and results. And then, we reach out and find out, things like injuries, the fact that, somebody won big last week and they're expected to win big this week, and then all of a sudden they're upset. You come to find out, they lost, one of their star players, whether it be quarterback or running back, or, maybe it's the weather or something, this time of year with COVID and people not really being certain of how they're feeling. You just don't know. I mean, it's been one of those years that you're sort of rolling the dice. But fortunately, you guys have been faithful in terms of covering teams, and we've got different states have people that are videoing their games and putting them up on YouTube or on Facebook, and so we're able to look at a lot of different film on a lot of different teams. And so sometimes there's, when you take that preseason ranking or that early season ranking, and then come this time of year, all of a sudden you're looking at it and you're going, man, they were, they come all the way from 30 to where they're in the top 10, right?
Right.
Again, you don't know, and especially with the way things are, you might have a kid that shows up and he's this a star player that basically you weren't aware of, and it may take 2 or 3 games before all of a sudden, they figure out he's the guy, he's the go-to guy, and so they start using him in a lot more offense. So again, coming down to how the rankings go, this type of year, you sort of take those early season rankings and you sort of move them out of the way, and you really start concentrate on the things that are going on week to week, and that's the critical thing. We also factor in, if a team loses their quarterback and they lose the game, but they lose it close, well, you're not really going to penalize them because, hey, that player might be out for this week, but might be back next week, and so things change a lot. But you realize, okay, you shouldn't penalize them that much because they lose a star player for a week or two.
Right, and I think that's maybe the college football playoffs should take some advice from you on that, because there have been plenty of times where they immediately drop a team's rank by 10 ranks or more just because of them losing one player for a week or two. So maybe the college football playoffs should take some notes from you on that, especially you said it best. It's been one of those years that a lot of us are rolling the dice, and I commend you because you were one of the early ones to come out and mention. You were one of the early ones to come out. Of course, every year you pre-plan the tournament. You decide we're going to have it every year because it's an opportunity for the kids. And then coronavirus hits, the pandemic, and especially with at least the past few months, the numbers are going down. But Florida was a major hotspot for COVID-19. So when the pandemic first started, what was your reaction as the organizer of this tournament? And going through the rest of the months and now leading up to the national tournament, what steps are you and the NHSA taking to make sure that the tournament can still happen? What conversations have you had with the resort to make sure that everybody's safe? Just take me through the NHSA and its COVID-19 protocols.
Okay. Well, early on, obviously the concern was, if you go back historically, the big concern was, okay, we've got to lock down to contain the spread and to allow so that the hospitals don't become overwhelmed due to the spike in, people going to the hospital. Yep. And of course that, for most of the country, that was, for certain parts of the country, that was very apparent because of the population of those areas, because of the political scene in those areas, because of the the density of their situation, population and land mass and all that, as well as how much, how many hospital beds they have and all those other things that factor into play. But knowing the Panama City Beach area, knowing where that's located, knowing the types of teams that we have come down there, we knew early on that again, figuring that it was going to play itself out, that education and being able to figure out what exactly this thing was and how to handle it and what the critical thing was about them, who's going to get it, how severe was it? What are the anomalies? What are the concerns? All those things have pretty much played themselves out over the months, and certain parts of Florida were obviously affected more so than some of the other areas. And of course, when you factor in population, okay, well, the Panhandle isn't that heavily populated, and maybe during the summer when you get the beach people coming down there, the vacationers, you might have concern there. But our tournament's in November. We're not the only game in town, but at the same time, it's a small sleepy beach town that time of year, and the facilities where we go are and we use are such that there really shouldn't be a problem with COVID. Obviously, teams coming in from different areas, they're already been dealing with the COVID situation through their entire football season. So for the most part, the expectation is that they basically are going to stick together, and we won't have as much interaction as we might have in other years. So that basically, we don't want to jeopardize anything, and at the same time, we'll have the temperature readers. We'll have some masks available, but in Florida, it's not required now. Masks are not required in general, except for if your particular restaurant or store or hotel or whatever decides that they want to mandate that, they can do so, but it's not mandatory. And Laguna Beach, they've been open during this whole process. They've had groups come in and stay there, and they pretty much have set up their housekeeping and house cleaning duties, and pretty much their experience has been that it should not be a problem, has not been a problem, and so we don't foresee it being anything that's of major concern.
That's a really good thing on behalf of the Laguna Beach Resort to be on board to still have the national tournament hosted there. And so far with them hosting other groups and everything, that they're not having any issues. It means, well, first off, they're getting their protocols right, which is a big thing. But especially for you as an event coordinator, if Laguna Beach were to say the case numbers are going up, or we've had an issue, we're not able to host you this year, then that's one of those situations where as an event coordinator, oh no, I have to find out who's going to host the tournament and if we're going to still put this on in that situation. So it's really good that they've been open during all this.
Yes, and that's one of those things where you just never know, and being the type of year that it's been, you're just kind of taking every day at a time, and hopefully you're going to just weather through it. And I know with the football season now pretty much into where everybody's had their opportunities and kind of, they've played enough games and they're still playing. They haven't canceled their season. So, we're certainly reaching out there to those top teams, and right now we've got top teams coming down there. So it should be a great tournament. And just looking forward to some good football and opportunity to host it again.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to some good football as well. And we've been seeing that through the season. Of course, very thankful with the various states that are still allowing for high school football to participate. Some of them not able to field any teams or even step out on the football field because of the pandemic. But these past few weeks, as the playoffs have shaped, particularly in the TSIAA, but additionally the playoffs shaping up down in Alabama, over in the South Carolina and other regions, it's been really interesting to see how those playoffs have shaped out under the circumstances. And as you mentioned, you have the luxury of viewing our broadcasts, viewing other student-led broadcasts, and seeing statistics and film on players and all those factors combined. So what are your thoughts on how the season has played out to this point as we're about to get into November and from this point about 4 weeks out from the national tournament?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, with the, we do have the Tennessee Heat that are, ranked high and are planning to come to the tournament. But we've always had, one of the Tennessee teams from, I guess this year their new league is got a different format, and so with the COVID and the delay in the kind of opening of the season, they're not actually going to have a representative from their league come down to the tournament, which is unfortunate because they've represented themselves well over the past, I guess, 5 or 6 years.
Yep.
And, especially this year because they've got 4 or 5 strong teams, any of which could, show up over the tournament, over the playoffs and win this thing, so I know just in terms of for some of those teams, even though they may not be seeded number 1, they certainly are capable of winning that championship. And unfortunately, that this year's they're not going to be able to attend or come and compete. So maybe we can get them next year to maybe organize their schedule around the tournament and complete their championship maybe the weekend before, and be able to send one of their champion down to the tournament. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, that's certainly a hope in the long run, because I hope that I hope the conference does look at that, because last year it did play out because their championship was hosted the second weekend of November, and then of course you had your 8-man tournament the third, and then the fourth weekend, and it went right into Thanksgiving last year. So I'm in the same boat with you. I agree that the TSIAA should definitely look at when they host there, because they've got 3 weekends essentially of football play that they have to hold for their current playoff format. So I certainly hope that they look into it and possibly push it back to where the first round of the playoffs occurs the final weekend of October, and then first 2 weekends, possibly something like that. But it's, yeah, and you're right. The TSIAA, formerly MTAC, is runner-up last year, only lost by a 2-point conversion, and they were the state champions of MTAC. 2018 champions were Christian Community, and they fell to Evangel, but they won the national championship in 2017. So it's just an example of how Tennessee teams compete very well in the national tournament, and whether or not they win or not, it's still a situation of where their kids are able to display their talent fully, and obviously it benefits the NHSA in the long run, because it makes it so that you are putting on good competition, but it always gives the players another opportunity.
Yeah, it does, and the one thing that's clear is Tennessee and Alabama have historically been excellent and at the top of the 8-man competition on a national scale. And that's one of those things where, that tends to be the annual, I don't know how you'd say it, but the teams that come down there, that's usually who's playing in those championship games.
And I now, as the national organizer, of course, you haven't had to have these discussions in the past because most of the state organizations, when they coordinate these, it just happens to fall upon circumstances to where the teams don't have to approach their conference about, can we move this stuff back? Can we rearrange it so that we can go to the national championship? Do you think going into next year that might be a conversation you would try to have with the TSIA board about moving their stuff back so that their teams can come down to Florida?
Absolutely. I am hoping that that conversation happens fairly early, because I know that's one of those things where the football usually that schedule usually comes together in January or even sometimes in December. So again, it's one of those things where I think one of the keys is I think more of the Tennessee teams are aware of the championship, and so it might have been in years past where they weren't, not all of them were aware of it. And so maybe there's enough of them that are aware of it that will go into that decision making. At least we hope. I know there may be a different board. I don't know what the current board makeup is at this time, and especially since it's changed from the MTAC to the current TSIA or AI?
Yep, TSIA.
TSIA, yeah. So I don't know if that board's the same or if it's different, and I guess that's my fault for not knowing. But at the same time, that's something that's a priority in terms of to at least make some inroads into a conversation with them.
We're in the same situation as you. We don't know who makes up the TSIA board other than the executive director, John Horner. We know the assistant executive director is Jordan Flanders, who, of course, you have a good, cordial relationship with, as he's been down to the national tournament several times with Christian Community. But right. we really know the majority of the rest of the makeup of that board. Maybe they should send you that information, and maybe the moment that you release your schedule, because you release the national tournament schedule fairly early, around maybe December or January, and they usually have their scheduling meeting the first weekend of March after enrollment is established at the schools. But maybe the moment that the schedule is finalized, the coach looks at that and shows it to the board and said, hey, we should maybe restructure our season and tournament format to make it so we are able to go down to this and show what the TSIA has to offer. Yeah.
Hopefully we can do that. I don't, you never know what the agenda is for different groups, but at the same time, you certainly want to reach out and make them aware of it. I've had a lot of conversation with the Heartland Conference out in the Midwest, which is made up of teams in Oklahoma and Missouri and Arkansas. And, that's a case where they've made overtures into sending their conference champion one of these times. And Thought that might be this year, but again, COVID had an impact on that. And the uncertainty, obviously, of whether teams were going to play football or not, right? I mean, that's sort of where people were early on. And so hopefully next year will be different. Hopefully we won't be dealing with, any of the current issues that are at hand right now. So.
Hopefully that's the situation, but at least for now, the national tournament does press on, and we're looking forward to covering as much of that tournament as we can on November 14th with the semifinals, and then Monday, November 16th with the consolation game and national championship. But, well, Hank, definitely appreciate you taking the time for this interview. We're looking forward to seeing you again in person in November, and looking forward to seeing what the NHSA has to offer going into the 2020 National Championship. But appreciate your time, Hank.
Thank you, Spencer. Thank you for having me, and enjoy watching you guys perform on Friday and Saturday nights.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you.